can you secure a $3 million deal whilst earning $80,000 a year?
Bank is one solution. I'm kind of spray a number of different concepts out there.
Together with Rob Flux, property developer and head of the Property Developer Network, we unpack details on how even if you're on a smaller income, with the right know-how, you could potentially be building bigger deals.
What is the problem I can solve for someone? For your investors, you can make money that they can't because you've put the time, effort and money into that experience.
As well as some of the keys to becoming a successful property developer in 2025.
So much of it is mindset, isn't it?
It's all mindset. If you can make a deal out of no money, then you can do pretty much any deal on earth. We make money by solving problems. What we've got to do is look at the problem in front of us and go,
if you've been wanting to learn more about how to manufacture growth in property, but maybe start on a lower wage, what are the less spoken about financing options that savvy developers use that you could potentially use too? My name's Todd Sloan. This is the Pizza and Property Podcast. This episode is powered by Future-Proof Property Advisory, Property Developer Network, and InvestorKit. More about our amazing show sponsors in the show notes below. But right now, if you've ever wanted to learn about how to get bigger projects off the ground, potentially create some serious profit when you're on a smaller wage, you're going to enjoy this episode. Let's jump straight into the chat with Rob Flux. $3 million deal on an 80K wage. This isn't clickbait, is it, Rob?
no, it's not clickbait.
Okay.
It is absolutely humanly possible and done very regularly. It's just not as easy as you would like it to be. So long as you're prepared to do the work and think creatively, we can get the job done.
We're talking about doing multi-million dollar deals. Might be worth a bit of extra work.
Absolutely.
So I know what it takes to get into millions of dollars of debt. I'm currently in millions of dollars of debt, right? And
Congratulations.
built a pretty decent sized portfolio. However, I didn't do it all on an 80K wage. Started on a very low wage, but then started building income, building rental income, so on and so forth. You're talking about something different. You've got a very different approach to this.
I want to preface this by saying most of us are thinking with traditional lending methodologies involved, so residential lending. So with residential lending, they're assessing you based on your ability to repay a loan over a 20 or 30-year period.
Yep.
And because of that, your serviceability starts to become a critical element of that. So both a deposit and also the serviceability element. And they need to prove that you can afford it even when you don't have tenants and that sort of thing. And you've got to have a long lifespan left in you and all that sort of thing. So it gets harder as you get older and that sort of stuff. When we look at property development, we're not looking at 20 or 30 years. We're looking at anywhere between 6 months and 2 years for the duration of the project. And we're manufacturing a profit. So we actually have many different ways to actually solve that solution, because the bank is now not looking at the serviceability, but they're looking at the deal itself. And they go, well, can we actually manufacture that profit in the deal?
Okay, so you're talking about putting a deal together and then taking it to a bank and looking at it through a totally different lens.
So bank is one solution, but there are many solutions to this. So I'm kind of going to spray a number of different concepts out there. The key thing is we don't want to let our lack of resources stop us from being resourceful, because there's a deal here to be done. It's just how do we put it together?
Gotcha. So what's the first step?
Well, it's understanding what it's actually going to take to run the deal. So there's acquisition phase, then there's construction phase, and there's also some liquid cash to actually run the deal, to actually get all the development approvals in place. So you've got to understand those different phases and what the cash flow requirements are in each of those. So it might be an equation where that 80K might get you the acquisition phase because you can prove the serviceability on a single home at that point in time. And it might be that you could actually get the development approval, but you might not be able to construct using the residential lending because you haven't got the serviceability for that. But getting the development approval gives you what is called a soft equity uplift. You've improved the value of the property. That soft equity uplift might be enough to then get you a construction lender to then take on the remainder of the deal. So that's one way to solve that particular problem.
I was going to say, you're already talking about this in a way of that there's multiple ways at all of these different stages. Can we walk this through a bit of a scenario? So there's someone on $80,000 a year, which is roughly the Australian average wage right now. They're wanting to put together a deal and they don't have like a huge income. So serviceability wise, it's pretty shot. Are they starting with savings, with equity, or are we going to do like a money partner? How does this kind of unfold?
Well, there are many tools in the toolbox, and it's about looking at your own personal situation and going, what do I need? And on a previous episode, we talked about negotiations. What does the vendor need? And that we try to do is we try to match the gap. Right? Because we might find the vendor can give us some very creative acquisition, terms that may mean that we don't need to actually own the property. So if we don't need to own the property and rather we can control the property because the vendor's allowing us to be creative, then we can potentially bypass the acquisition phase of the project. So that's another way to potentially solve the problem.
All right, why don't we start pulling apart like a bit of a real world scenario? But before we do, is there a few more ways? Because I know that, again, there's multiple ways to do this.
Well, there might also be friends and family or potentially investors that will actually come into the deal. So it doesn't necessarily have to be your money. So long as you've got the skills to actually execute the deal, they've got the money to do it. You join forces together and do a joint venture to do that. So that's another way to actually stitch the deal together. So there's multiple different elements to put it together. So the key thing is knowing what situation will fit that particular deal.
And I guess this also comes back to, like you and I discussed previously on episodes beforehand, about what the deal actually needs. Some deals need time, some deals need money, some deals, like there's always a difference.
Yeah, correct. One of the ways to actually unlock that, and I kind of touched on it before, you need to understand your circumstance. You also need to understand the needs of the vendor. What does the vendor actually want? And when you can map those two and actually see what is the difference between them, then to stitch the deal together, you just have to kind of join the dots. So if we go through a couple of, well, like an example of a fictitious vendor trying to sell a property, there's a huge number of baby boomers out there that had the dream of the great big backyard and that sort of thing, you know, the great Australian dream. Problem is they're now at an age where looking after that backyard's now a pain in the butt. They can't mow it, that sort of thing. And with the amount of density that we need, all those big backyards are now getting carved up into, I guess, smaller projects, small subdivisions or townhouse projects and that sort of thing. So that particular baby boomer is sitting on a gold mine, but it's his principal place of residence, but he wants to get the maximum return out of it, but he doesn't know how to unlock it himself.
Okay, so we've got, let's call him Dave. So Dave is a baby boomer. He's sitting on a ton of equity. He bought the place for $38,000 many years ago. It's now worth a lot of money. And he can't take care of it anymore.
He can't take care of it anymore.
Okay.
So by understanding what Dave's needs are and then kind of mapping out the process for him, we then go, well, is there a deal I can stitch together for him? And so I can give you a few different scenarios where Dave might be able to play into our deal.
All right, so can we unpack Dave's scenario? Let's start pulling this apart.
Dave wants to move on to an aged care facility but hasn't yet chosen where his aged care facility is. And so he's going to need time to find the right place. That aged care facility has a fee, I guess, in order to get into it. So they have, typically there's going to be a choice of how that actually goes in. So you could pay a lump sum payment to get in, or you could pay an installment plan to get in, or you could do an installment plan and then lump sum it later on.
Gotcha.
So he's going to need time to find his place. Now, if we use that time to our advantage, we might be able to get the soft equity uplift through the development approval process. And we've not yet settled, so we've not incurred the holding costs of actually owning that property yet.
And so this is coming back to what your favourite strategy is from what you've always said. It's that long settlement delay or delayed settlement with early access.
Correct. Which what that does, it avoids the interest for that period that I don't own it. It avoids the land tax for that period I don't own it. It avoids the rates for that period that I don't own it. So if we look at a very simple $1 million deal, current interest rates are 6.5%. That's $65,000 worth of interest I've saved. That's also probably $10,000 worth of rates I've saved and probably $10,000 to $15,000 worth of land tax that I've saved. So I'm very fast approaching $100,000 worth of savings in the deal. Now, if I offer Dave that $100,000 more for his property, but I say to Dave, I'll give that to you in 12 months' time, my deal hasn't cost me any more. But my cash flow has now, instead of having to come up with the deposit and the serviceability today, now I'm going to come up with the sale of the finished product at the end.
And this is how you're starting this on an 80K wage.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, so what you're doing in the meantime is essentially moving the DA through all of the process to then add that, you said a term, soft equity uplift.
Yeah, correct. But the key element here is we're controlling the property without owning it.
So how long do you want with this then? You're not just like negotiating a month or two because it may as well just be a normal settlement. You're negotiating what, 6 months, 12 months?
So it depends on the kind of deal that we're actually doing. So I guess if we're doing a very basic 1 into 2 subdivision, then we probably only need 9 months to run that whole deal from start to finish. If we're trying to do a construct on that, we might need 18 months. If we're trying to do a duplex project or a townhouse project, we might need anywhere up to 2 years. So the more complex the deal, the longer time that we'd actually want.
Makes sense. Okay. Now, as far as costs are concerned, that if let's say it is more of a simple 1 into 3, okay? So no one's building a row of townhouses, but they're wanting to just cut their teeth on their first one. what kind of cash are they needing aside to actually pay for those like development applications, everything?
Well, you're going to need the liquid cash to run the deal. So you're going to need to pay your town planner and your civil engineer and your architect or your draftsman, that sort of thing, in order to actually put the development application together, your council application fees, etc. Depending upon your state or jurisdiction and the complexity of the deal, that could be as little as $50,000, could be as much as, say, $200K, depending upon
the size
of the deal and that sort of thing. But if you've got that liquid cash, and remember, it doesn't have to be your liquid cash, that could be one of your friends or family that's actually investing in the deal, then you're able to get that development approval, now get the soft equity uplift of the property itself. That soft equity uplift could be enough to then fund the commercial construction side of things, which would then pay Dave back and fund the construction at the same time. So as a pure hypothetical, noting that it's a $3 million deal and we're aiming for a 20% profit on cost, we're anticipating around about $600,000 worth of interest or our profits out of the deal.
It's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
So we've got a fair bit of headroom to go, how can we bring other people along on the journey and what could we actually offer them to actually help participate and cash flow this? So if we're going to fund Dave to live in the aged care facility for 12 months, that might cost us $2,000 a month.
Okay, yeah.
So that's around about $25K. So we might get one of our friends or family to lend us $25K to fund Dave to be in the deal.
I was going to say, because we're only on $80K a year here, so there's probably only so much savings that this person's got. So
correct.
You're borrowing this money as well.
We're borrowing this money as well.
So what would you offer? Like, how are you enticing people to keep throwing money at you?
Give me a crazy interest rate. What is an insane interest rate that you would think that?
It's 20%.
20%. Great.
Yeah.
So if we are looking at borrowing $25,000 for a 12-month period, 20% is only $5,000. We've got $600,000 to play with. Do you think that you'd be happy with $595,000 out of your deal?
Yeah, pretty happy with it.
Pretty happy with that.
Yeah. And I'm probably pretty sure I could find someone that would be happy with 20% interest on just 25 grand.
And it's that mindset and philosophy to say, well, we can take a little bit out of our final number and redistribute that to friends and family and other investors that are known to us, and that's important that they're actually known to us, and have them come along the journey along the way.
And okay, let's open up this soft equity uplift a little bit more. So with the soft equity uplift, this is purely because you've added value to the site, because now the DA has been approved. So the bank or whoever you're using for finance and go, okay, cool, we can understand how this is now worth X more. You've created value.
And we can see what the finished product is actually going to sell for. So,
got it.
So that is called gross realised value. It's a GRV. So we can see what that GRV is worth.
Yep.
And depending upon the lender, they'll actually look at either the percentage of GRV that they'll lend against, or a percentage of the total development cost that they'll lend against.
Okay, so now we're looking at developing this land. So Dave's now in his nursing home. He's happy. He doesn't have to mow the lawns anymore. We've got a site that we've secured, haven't taken ownership of yet, because we'd need a lot more money to take ownership of it. But we've put some money into it that we've borrowed from another friend perhaps, or we've got 50K in savings, whichever one.
So we might be paying a monthly rental for Dave for the short term, while we're waiting for the big payday, and then we can then pay off the whole lot. And so long as there's no out of pocket for Dave, Dave's where he wants to be.
He's happy.
He's happy.
So this is what I'm trying to understand now, because you're still on an $80,000 wage. So even if you've got all this equity, you're not going to be able to service this huge thing, are you? Like, you're going to need to get some development financing?
Well, when you say servicing, that's not servicing a loan per se. So you don't have to apply for credit in order to get that. There's a number of different factors. A, do you have any cash reserves? B, do you have any equity in your own property that you could actually have borrowed against to get a small amount? Remembering, we're not funding him for a long period of time. We're just funding him for a small period of time. Or C, do you want to get investors into the deal to actually just cash flow that for the short term, and you might pay them an interest rate.
All right. So for the sake of Dave, and I'm going to call the other character Rob, this is going to be you here, just obviously a little while ago when you only had 80K a year. How is he funding, or how is Rob now funding the rest of this deal?
Well, a number of permutations, but the simplest one that we see most people in our community do is they would actually get friends or family or other people to actually invest in the deal. So
private money.
Private money. So what's called OPM, other people's money. Now, there's some rules that we have to be careful of with regards to ASIC and not going out and advertising or a bunch of things like that. But if they're friends that are actually known to you and they know what you're actually doing, they know, like, and trust you, then they're highly likely to actually invest in your deal if you actually demonstrate you've done the homework and you've proven that the deal is actually profitable.
Do you find that's the biggest kind of hurdle to jump over is if you're first time, you're new at this, and you're trying to ask people for potentially hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to go, yeah, I know what I'm doing. They're like, how many times have you done this before? Oh, none.
It's the biggest mental roadblock that you're actually getting over. And for me personally, when I was going through that, it took me 6 months for me to get over my own limiting beliefs that was even humanly possible. And as soon as I went and asked one person, I got the money, but I was too afraid to ask.
What did it? Like what got you over it?
My deal was stuck and I couldn't get out any other way other than to ask at that point in time.
Because you backed into a corner.
Well, yes, but that got me over the fear factor of actually asking someone. If I can use a little anecdote from not property, in a previous world, I used to work in IT world, and I used to get charged out at $250 an hour. This is 20 plus years ago, which was a lot of money back in the day. And I had this limiting belief that I was worth that money. And my boss to me at the time said, it's not about the hourly rate that you're on. It's whether or not you can actually solve that person's problem. And if you can solve their problem, they are willing to pay that price. And so all you have to do now is go, what is the problem I can solve for someone? So for your investors, you can make money that they can't because you've put the time, effort and money into that experience.
So stop looking at you and start looking at them.
And go, how can I help them and add value to their life? So they've got money sitting idle in the bank doing nothing. But I have the skills in order to do this property development process because I've invested my own, I guess, time and effort and money into learning that process. I can apply my skills and make me money and them money at the same time. You're almost doing them a disservice by not bringing them along on the road.
So much of it is mindset, isn't it?
It's all mindset.
Because like this isn't just like this fictitious story that we're making up now. This is something that you see literally every week.
Well, it happened to me personally.
It happened to you personally. Can we dig a little bit deeper into that then as well? But getting over this, and I want to be conscious of time, but getting into the right mindset, because right now we've just walked through a story of how someone on $80K a year can potentially put together a multi-million-dollar deal. But I feel like there's still going to be so many people watching going, oh yeah, but that's maybe other people, not me.
The first time, that mental roadblock is very hard to overcome. But once you've unlocked that, then it's one of those things you can't relock. So it's just overcome it that one time. And from then on, if you can make a deal out of no money, then you can do pretty much any deal on earth.
I want to do this now just as a challenge. I've never done this before. I've always used bank financing. I've never used other people's money.
So if we go back to the $3 million deal, we're trying to make a 20% profit on cost. We're going to make around about $600,000. So we can keep all of that to ourselves, or we can give that back to our friends and family and that sort of thing who've invested in us to actually get us to the deal. So if I walk away with $300,000, $400,000, I'm super happy and I've given them some along the way. And it's really just taking that approach to go, I don't need all of it for me. How do I help you?
And the biggest takeaways I'm getting from this isn't actually the developing side. And this seems to be a running theme whenever you and I chat now. It's like developing is kind of it's almost the footnote. And I don't want to say that as like it doesn't matter, because it absolutely is the crux of it. But it's the thing that needs to be driven forward from the mindset, from the problem solving, the way that you look at the world. It's the lens, really.
Yeah, correct. So you need to have a very open-minded approach to your problems that sit in front of you. And any problem that's there, am I going to go under it, around it, over it, or through it? In a nutshell, mate, we make money by solving problems. What we've got to do is look at the problem in front of us and go, how do we add value to somebody's life? And if we can do that, then we manufacture the profits in the process. That's the point. So it's just, what is the problem? Who is the person we're helping? And how does that actually get us to the next phase of the project?
Mate, I've got so much on at the moment, so I can't commit to this right now, but 100%, let's you and I chat about making some content about me actually putting a deal together with other people's money for the first time. I reckon there is absolutely something in this, Rob.
All good. But we need to make sure that with your audience, mate, we're not going to break any ASIC rules.
No, yes. Okay, careful. Whatever I need to say, I will. Yeah, let's do this above board. Rob Flux, as always, mate, it's an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you again for jumping on the show.
You're welcome, mate.